Morning, everybody. I hope this finds you well. At least it's morning where I am. This is chapter 5 in our introduction to fire protection and emergency services. And once again, I'm not going to do the narrated PowerPoint. This is about resources that are available to the fire service for a variety of reasons, in a variety of ways, for a variety of purposes. And it's there are things mentioned in this that I had no idea existed. So I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but I did want to point out a couple of things and some highlights of some of the more important organizations. I'm going to look at my notes as we go through here. Some of these organizations are for the fire personnel, for the personnel. They support the personnel. Some support operations in the department. Some support the operations in the community. There's just a lot of different types of support that are provided. Some support the fire service by research. And so all of these organizations working together makes it better, safer, easier, maybe, if you will, for folks in the fire service. So, we want to make sure that we are learning from the experience of others, and some of these organizations help us do that. When we look at national and international organizations, I think one of the biggest ones we think about is the National Fire Protection Association. It is a nonprofit organization, though sometimes people say, oh, their stuff is so expensive, which I agree in many ways, but they are still considered nonprofit. They were organized in 1896, so they've been around for a while. And they, to me, are the best resource for fire service information materials, up to date. I know people used to talk about their public education materials being expensive, but they were vetted, they were accurate, they were timely, and so you really got what you were paying for. Of course, there's a lot of standards that come out of there, and NFPA is not a lawmaking body. They have standards, guides, recommendations, but I've always said that it's the go-to organization in our field. And so when something messes up, people are going to say, well, what does an FPA have to say about that? So there is just a lot of our standards for everything, for apparatus, for staffing, for qualifications, for different positions, all different kinds of stuff. Of course, there's also a lot of educational materials that they produce, and this is where I say these are educationally sound, excellent materials. And I will say that a lot of them are available online today, which means you can just download them. You don't have to purchase anymore. Riskwatch, Learn Not to Burn was one of the first ones, and I was actually a part of. They had a Learn Not to Burn Champions program back in the 90s, I will say. And I was one of the Learn Not to Burn champions. So they're age appropriate, a lot of different information. There's also the Remembering When program, which is for our senior adults. Again, another educationally sound, vetted, tested, tried program that is very good. Some other national type of organizations include the U.S. Department of Transportation, that gives us our emergency response guidebook for hazardous materials, the Association of American Railroads, the American Petroleum Institute. Those deal, of course, with a lot of hazmat incidents. The Chemical Transport Emergency Center, ChemTREC. This is something that some of us may be very familiar with, is a 24-hour emergency number for chemical emergency incidents. I've had to call ChemTREC before. I'm sure those of you that are working in the field have had to call as well. And actually, this is a group, if I remember right, I'm looking while I say this, it's funded by insurance. It's better off for them. The Chlorine Institute Another one that can help you with any kind of chlorine incidents, your water treatment facilities, even just pools. The FAA, of course, we work with the FAA when it comes to airplane crashes. Something else that we may be working with them on today is the use of drones and making sure that that the airways are safe. The National Transportation Safety Board, again, they may investigate, and so we will work with them. I'm going to go through again. I'm kind of zooming through some of these. American Fire Sprinkler Association certainly is something that is. These are contractors, manufacturers, dealers, distributors of automatic fire sprinklers, and they actually have a magazine entitled Sprinkler Age magazine. Which I wasn't sure that I knew that. ASTM, the American Society for Testing and Materials, product quality, enhances safety, and you may see different ASTM regulation codes on items. There's something called the Automatic Fire Alarm Association. FM Global Factory Mutual, they're kind of like, they're another testing laboratory like Underwriter Laboratory. They have consulting services, property inspection. They also offer grants as well, just kind of a sidebar there, or at least they used to. But they do evaluate devices, equipment, and that sort of thing. The National Fire Sprinkler Association, again, fire sprinkler contractors, manufacturers, and certainly these are organizations that we want to make sure that we are partnering with, or at least that we are accessing and staying in touch with as far as up-to-date information on what is going on in these communities. There's ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, which is, again, a private nonprofit. Identifies public requirements for national safety, engineering, and industrial standards. Again, you may see ANSI standards listed in documents, building plans, documents, and that kind of thing. Of course, the Building Officials and Code Administrators, BOCA, is an organization that produces model codes. Some of those, there's different kinds of codes depending on where you are. That's one that can be adopted by a jurisdiction. The International Conference of Building Officials, the ICBO, created the Uniform Building Code, or the UBC. The Center for Campus Fire, the Center for Campus Fire Safety, is another nonprofit national organization that provides a lot of resources. September is Campus Fire Safety Month. If you have a campus in your community, you may want to go to the Center for Campus Fire Safety website. There's a lot of educational materials there as well. The International Fire Code, again, is a model code, the IFC, which has done a lot. It's a consensus code. And if I remember right, don't quote me, this is what Georgia now uses. There is the IBC, the International Building Code, and the IFC for the International Fire Code. Let's see, or the UFC, excuse me, the Uniform Fire Code and the Uniform Building Code, the UBC. They've also published the International Urban Wildland Interface Code, the WUI code. And so that's another one that's kind of new. We used to have the Southern Building Code Congress here, and the Georgia did away with that, and they don't use that anymore, I hope. That's the last I heard. Anyway, sometimes I'm not up to date on my codes information here in the state because I'm kind of out of the loop with that. The National Safety Council is a private organization that educates and influences society to adopt safety and health policies. They actually have a CPR segment where you can teach CPR through the National Safety Council. When we look at some of the disaster assistance and recovery, of course, the first one that comes to mind is American Red Cross. A lot of times they take a hard hit from the community, but they are an excellent organization. Disaster assistance and recovery is just one of the things that they do. Of course, we know that they do training. They do blood drives. It's called a quasi-governmental agency. It's not a government agency, but it is listed in the national response, the national response plan for disasters. Salvation Army is another one. It is a international church-based nonprofit organization, and they provide a lot of services in the community, but during disasters, they can provide canteen services. We have referred people there for assistance with fires, recovery from that. And then the American Rescue Dog Association, which I did not know that existed, provides volunteer search and rescue dogs and handlers free of charge. So this is another good organization to know about. Another category is professional accreditation and certification. So there we have the BCSP, which is the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. We have the Fire Department Safety Officers Association, International Fire Service Accreditation Congress, IFSAC, which, let's see, I think on one of, maybe they don't mention it here, we are pro board here in the state of Georgia. IFSAC is the same thing as MPQ. I say the same, they're similar types of organizations. And then professional research. There's a lot of organizations that are doing some really great stuff with research in fire behavior, in building construction under fire, that sort of thing. The International Association for Fire Safety Science, the Society of Fire Protection Engineers, again, Underwriter Laboratory. It's similar to FM Global. They have it over on this side because they do talk here about that professional research. And I'm hoping that somewhere along the way they will mention in here NIST, the National Institute for Safety and Standards. If not, I will. Fire apparatus and equipment, of course, the Fire Apparatus Manufacturers Association. There's a lot of organizations for personnel and training. The IAFC, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the International Association of Firefighters. These are the International Association of Firefighters, of course, is the union that represents firefighters and their interests, approximately 200,000 members in the United States and Canada. The National Volunteer Fire Council does a lot of work with volunteer fire departments. Again, their work is not solely applicable just to volunteers. It has a lot of implications for paid departments as well. We have the International Association of Arson Investigators, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. All of these are doing a lot of work in the area of research and safety. The International Society of Fire Service Inspectors, ISFSI, and even the International City County Management Association, the ICMA, is an organization that's local government management professionals to try to strengthen urban government through professional management. Incident management type organizations, FireScope, we all know about or should know about FireScope, Firefighting Resources of Southern California, organized for potential emergencies. This has a lot to do with our incident command system that we have learned about. The National Response Center, one call notification service for hazardous materials emergencies. And then, of course, our insurance providers. There's the Insurance Committee for Arson Control, the Insurance Services Office, or ISO. ISO is a big one for many of us today. For emergency medical services, you might have the International Rescue and Emergency Care Association, the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians, and then, of course, the National Registry. Those are just to name a few. Some other federal organizations that we might look at: the Department of Defense, the Department of Labor, Emergency Management Institute. This is a parallel to the National Fire Academy in that they provide training for public sector managers. They are also based on the campus of the National Fire Academy. The National Emergency Training Center, that is the headquarters or the campus of the NETC, is EMI and the National Fire Academy share the same campus. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. Hopefully in this course or in others, we're going to look at NIOSH reports and see what they say looking at firefighter deaths. Great information that comes out of those. They undertook the National Firefighter Fatality Investigation and Prevention Program in 1998. I think it was with the CDC prior to that, and NIOSH took it over. Some others, here's the National Institute of Standards and Training, NIST. They have done some really great research work. We're going to, hopefully that we can download, and I'll post some of these on our website. Lightweight construction, wind-driven fires, positive pressure ventilation. I'm trying to think of some others that we might think about. Done some excellent work in those fields, and really has a lot to do with firefighter safety. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, of course, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, under which FEMA used to fall, but does not anymore. They've been back and forth and back and forth. I don't know what their problem is. Department of Interior, there are 3 agencies with firefighting duties that fall under the Department of the Interior. There is the U.S. National Park Service, there's the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So they have their own firefighting areas that fall under the Department of Interior. The National Interagency Fire Center, this is NIFC, is a cooperative effort of the Department of the Interior and the Department of the Agriculture. Of course, FEMA was created in 1978 by then President Jimmy Carter, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The goal there was to place all federal disaster response coordination under one agency. And they are fast at work right now with hurricanes that have struck the United States. The United States Fire Administration, USFA, this was established by the Federal Fire Prevention and Control Act and actually falls under FEMA. Its purposes were to reduce the nation's loss of fire through fire prevention and control, to supplement existing programs of research, training, and education, and to encourage new and improved programs. And then the National Fire Academy, which was organized under FEMA as a part of that same federal, the Fire Prevention and Control Act. Our campus is in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And again, if you've never been, you should go. The Department of Justice, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Some of you may have worked with this organization on fire investigations of a large nature. They're there to assist with that, as well as bomb incidents. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Environmental Protection Agency, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as well as the Coast Guard, all have a hand in assisting fire departments, especially the last couple were more with hazardous materials incidents. Now, when we get into state organizations, I'm just going to name some ones that we have. Of course, we have the State Fire Marshal's Office that falls under the Office of the Insurance Commissioner for the state of Georgia. At this moment, Dwayne Garris is our State Fire Marshal. State Fire Training falls through the Georgia Fire Academy. It's headquartered at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center in Forsyth. They provide a lot of training for state and local firefighters, police officers, corrections officers, and others. State Emergency Management Agency, GEMA, is also located at their, they have a training office at GIPSTIC, the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. They also have another headquarters office in Atlanta. And of course, they provide training and assistance to local governments to prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate disasters. The State Fire Chiefs Association, the Georgia Association of Fire Chiefs, the Georgia State Firefighters Association, both of these are big organizations here in our state. We're glad to have them. The State Police Organization, which GSP, Georgia State Patrol. We also have a State Environmental Protection Agency. also any other type of state. The National Guard. Here in Georgia, we have Georgia Forestry, which is also highly involved in, of course, wildland fires. And then special task forces. And this is where we've seen a real outgrowth in the state of the task force training, regional task force with lots of equipment and training. These are for rescue, all different kinds of rescue types. Technical rescue task force is what they're referred to. So they're set up by districts, and we've seen a lot of outbreak of training in those areas. Then, of course, local organizations. Our Burn Foundation is a state organization. It started locally, the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation. If you're not acquainted with that, I would encourage you to do so. GFBF.org is their website. I am a longtime volunteer for the Burn Foundation here in Georgia. They are supported by annual boot drives. If you want to know more about that, you can contact me or the Burn Foundation office. Our local health department, local law enforcement, building department, water department, zoning planning commission, street department, even the judicial system. As you can tell, I'm going through these. We do have a state office of emergency medical services that wasn't mentioned in those state offices. You should also have an office of emergency management that is local. Everything, you kind of see the picture here. We have national, state, and then local organizations. Local firefighter unions that fall under the IAFF. And then there's all different kinds of community service organizations, different in each community. The Elks, the Kiwanis, the Lions, the Optimists, the Rotaries, all that, we call them the zoo clubs. But they can be a great support to you. They have people, they have money that can help with some of your projects that you may have ongoing. There's a lot of publications that are mentioned in the text. Firehouse, Fire Apparatus Journal, Fire Chief, Fire Engineering. I would encourage you to look on the Galileo, which you can access through your D2L training site. If you are not logged in through D2L to go to Galileo, you will need a password, and it changes every semester. But you can find, I know you can find Fire Engineering. We have asked the college here to add a couple of publications to that, and they should start showing up. I can't remember when she told me when, but a lot of these, Fire Rescue One is one of them, and I think Fire Engineering may be one that you can find articles related to your topics there as well. Kind of the summary here, this has been like a smorgasbord of resources. And I think it's important that we recognize what each of these resources has to offer us in the fire service in our vast array of duties. I think it's important that we recognize which ones we have locally, because we may not have access to all of these on a local basis. I think it is important to recognize what each of these organizations does so that when we are planning, doing, we can bring these people to the table. In any activity, organization, initiative in a community, the more people that are talking about it, the more credibility it has. The fire department can say, wear your seatbelt, just for example. But if the fire department, EMS, law enforcement, the health department, all these other organizations. Here in Georgia, we have the Governor's Office of Highway Safety is another one that's not mentioned. If they're all saying it, people begin to think, well, there may be something to this. So the more people that you can bring to the table, but you want to make sure that their interest is what your interest is as well. And again, there's those that support the firefighters personally in their jobs. There are those that support the community in recovery. There are those that support fire department in recovery efforts. So begin to look around. You have a writing assignment for this unit, but begin to look around in your own community. And some of these organizations you may never have thought about partnering with, or at least shaking hands with the people, so that when you do need them, not if, but when, you will at least know who to call. So go through the PowerPoint. Again, kind of a long laundry list, but very valuable information to us. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know. Thanks so much for paying attention.